It was 2015, a normal working day at the company, when the black CEO offered a piece of chewing gum to the white CEO in a friendly way, and the white CEO refused and said, "I don't take things from your kind." And the room pretended not to hear as deals and agreements continued, and the meeting ended with signatures and polite smiles, but with something stored like a secret between them. The white CEO walked out feeling untouchable, and the black CEO folded his hands, said nothing, buttoned his jacket, and left with quiet dignity. And a week later, everything began to fall apart in a way no one expected. The first blow was an audit that turned vicious. Regulators questioned filings that had always been accepted, and a partner's messy ledger entries looked less like mistakes and more like purposeful concealment. Banks tightened lines, investors got nervous, and the stock that had always risen with the white CEO's name began to tumble. Boardroom conversations shifted from strategy to survival. Polite concern turning predatory as one director finally said what everyone feared: "We need a scapegoat." The white CEO paced late into the night, calls from lawyers and regulators filling the air, and pride, the same pride that made him fling words like knives, froze him from calling for help. He rehearsed, "I can handle this," until even his assistant stopped picking up because the sentence had become hollow. Creditors smelled blood and moved fast. Accounts were frozen for covenant breaches. The board voted to suspend authority pending inquiries. Vendors halted shipments, and the PR team produced bland statements that did nothing to stop the panic. Rumors became headlines, and partners who once smiled in photos now sent careful, distanced emails. The building that had been the white CEO's empire seemed smaller, the elevators slower, the air thinner. Emergency funding rounds were offered and denied. Potential investors walked in, scanned the ledgers, and walked out with the same line: "We've seen this pattern before." On top of financial ruin, the personal collapse came with a cruel twist. His wife, Eleanor, packed a small bag, left a post-it that read, "I can't watch you drown," and walked out before he could process that his life was unraveling in every room he owned. The note hit harder than any creditor letter. Friends murmured excuses, but it was clear, where status had once held them together, its loss pulled everything else apart. At a bankruptcy hearing, the white CEO listened to the judge's questions about intent with no charm left to sell. One buried clause in a partner contract allowed loans to be called under stress, a clause triggered by the audit, and that single buried footnote read like a guillotine. The board voted to oust him, titles and privileges stripped. He walked out with a small box of personal items and the sudden, terrifying awareness that legal surrender and social collapse follow the same protocol. Allies disappear, vultures circle. Word reached the black CEO through quiet channels. People who move in honest circles heard the news, and a mutual contact called and said, "He's in trouble and no one will help." The black CEO paused, then asked for the details. He did not celebrate the fall. He recognized the talent that had built the company and saw the wreckage of mistakes. He could have let the market's lesson teach the white CEO alone, but the black CEO's view was practical. When a large employer collapses, people lose paychecks, families lose roofs, and an industry can be scarred. When the black CEO walked into the same building where the slides had been flung, receptionist's eyes widened because this was the same man the white CEO had dismissed with a cruel joke over gum. The black CEO greeted everyone with calm and got to work. He met with what remained of the legal team, read the forensic notes, and said simply, "You over-leveraged, you trusted partners without proper checks. Your risk model was optimistic where it needed to be skeptical." The white CEO could only nod, humbled in a way he had never been in a boardroom full of applause. Then a twist unfolded. One of the partner companies that had triggered the lender clause was itself hiding fraud, fake invoices, back-channel transfers, a scheme propping up failed ventures. The partner scandal drew a thread that exposed oversight failures stretching back years. The black CEO called a trusted lawyer, set a meeting with a bank that had frozen lines of credit, and asked for transparency and a bridge loan to keep payroll funded long enough to sort legal claims. "If this goes dark," he said plainly, "not only will people lose jobs, but the whole industry will suffer. We can fix this methodically, but only if we have runway." The bank, wary but pragmatic, agreed to a short-term facility under conditions: oversight, independent auditors, and real leadership change. There were small human moments that cut the tension, odd little scenes that felt like life pushing through a crack. The white CEO, forced to deal with notarized forms and mundane red tape, accidentally sent a group text meant for his lawyer to the company Slack that read, "I hate the smell of ballpoint pens in the morning," followed by a fish emoji. It trended in the office chat, and even Eleanor, who had left, replied with a laughing line about his stationery fetish. For an hour, people joked, and it brought a strange relief. Those moments of absurdity reminded everyone that even in collapse, people are ridiculous and tender. The black CEO did more than negotiate loans. He introduced buyers for non-core assets, untangled contracts, and, crucially, put personal capital into a rescue tranche structured as a conditional convertible note designed to protect employees and honor obligations. He did this quietly, refusing press attention, telling a reporter who asked if he wanted control, "This isn't about rivals. It's about people with mortgages and kids." That line diffused the room in a way money could not. Negotiations were brutal and honest. The black CEO did not want to seize power. He wanted stability. He proposed an oversight committee, forensic review of partner contracts, and a plan to restructure debt while keeping payroll for at least a month. He bargained with banks and creditors, not for headlines, but for breathing room. As the evidence of partner fraud mounted, criminal investigations shone light on who had been manipulating invoices and moving money through shadow accounts. The narrative shifted slowly in public eyes. What began as a story of one CEO's failure became a larger story about systemic risk and concealed malfeasance. The media that had once feasted on the white CEO's fall now covered the partner's arrests and the recovery plan, and quietly acknowledged the black CEO's role in stabilizing the company. When the white CEO finally asked, raw and embarrassed, "Why are you helping me?" the black CEO answered with a patience that cut deeper than triumph. "Because you built something that mattered beyond your ego. Because people will lose jobs that had nothing to do with your mistakes. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the right investment. And because people can learn." The white CEO listened, an armor of pride falling off in slow pieces. He started showing up differently, to hearings and negotiations not as an entitled man, but as someone willing to accept oversight and responsibility. He began to ask for help humbly, to accept advice on restructuring his personal finances, and to learn how to talk without alienating those he needed. There were courtroom scenes and public reckonings, settlements and fines. But thanks to cooperation and the forensic evidence, the white CEO avoided prison and helped set up restitution plans for affected employees. The black CEO's conditional note converted into a minority stake under terms that protected workers and creditors, and he insisted on an independent board to prevent any single-player arrogance from wrecking the company again. He invited the white CEO back as an advisor with the duty to lead a new initiative on ethical partnerships, a position that carried responsibility without old privileges. The white CEO accepted. He had lost titles and lifestyle, but he gained something he'd never valued: perspective. Eleanor watched the changes with cautious hope. She returned not because the money had healed everything, but because the man who'd been gone behind the facade had begun to return, showing up with remorse, with small, consistent acts, with a changed tone in his voice. Rebuilding trust took time. Not ceremonies, but small daily shifts. Listening more, delegating properly, checking assumptions, admitting mistakes. Along the way, there were moments of vindication for the black CEO that were quiet and human. A junior accountant pointed out in a hearing how payroll had been saved because of the bridge loan he insisted on. A former critic who had mocked his philanthropy was silenced by facts on a timeline showing lives preserved. And at a company meeting, the white CEO told a room full of employees, unadorned by PR, "I judged you wrong. I owe a debt of humility." People began to see him as fallible and sincere, not fallen and unredeemable. The media's tone softened as the criminal partners faced charges and the industry began to implement better oversight standards. The scandal became a case study in risk management and corporate accountability, and the black CEO's name came up not for conquest, but for steadiness. In private, the black CEO taught lessons the white CEO had never wanted to learn in applause-filled boardrooms. Listen first, verify assumptions, build diverse teams to catch blind spots, and treat pride as brittle currency. The white CEO learned to measure success differently, not in quarterly returns, but in the steadiness of jobs preserved and the integrity of contracts. He stumbled but tried, showing up at mentoring sessions, asking questions, and gradually becoming someone who could lead without bulldozing. When restructuring was finalized and the company stabilized, the convertible note converted, ensuring employee protections and creditor repayment, without the black CEO taking controlling power. He wanted systems fixed, not trophies. The white CEO, who had once spat derision in a boardroom, learned to say thank you without caveat, to admit fault, and to build checks against unilateral arrogance. At the end of the story, the funny little post that Eleanor left became a remembered line, told with a hard-won grin, a comic footnote in a bigger lesson. Humiliation without repair is cruelty. Humiliation followed by accountability is education. The white CEO would later joke at a small event, "If you're going to lose everything, make sure at least one of your emails is accidentally comic." And people laughed because the pain had been turned into a lesson rather than a wound that never scarred. The black CEO never sought the spotlight. He accepted a modest return and the quiet knowledge of having done something practical for hundreds of people. The white CEO carried the memory of being helped by the man he had insulted. He learned to say, "I'm sorry," and then to build structures that prevented a repeat of reckless pride. Their shared ending was not a parade. It was a small office moment where the white CEO, with neither title nor throne, said simply, "I owe you more than I can say," and the black CEO, with a steady smile, answered, "Then do better work." That'll be thanks enough.